Right, we might as well get kicked off now. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to give you a walkthrough of Perl Foundation, give you an update, what we're doing, what we're up to. I'm joined today by Peter, Makoto, Dave and Ricardo from the board. And we're all available for the Q&A at the end of this short presentation. So work out your questions along the way and we'll pick them up at the end. So a little bit about the Perl Foundation for those who don't know. The official name is Yet Another Society. We're registered in North America, operated globally by volunteers. I'm in the UK. The majority of the board are from North America. And Perl Foundation, the Perl Foundation is our doing business as name. And we also are now also doing business as the Raku Foundation. The purpose of the Perl Foundation is purely to serve the Perl and Raku communities. There's no other purpose. The Perl Foundation wouldn't have, without Perl, without Raku, there'd be no purpose for the Perl Foundation. So that's our number one purpose. Traditionally, we've been the bank manager, managing the grants and sponsorships and supporting conferences and so on. Around also governance, some of the legal aspects, intellectual property, we'll talk about that shortly, and organisational support. Effectively doing the things that are not interesting to the technical people who are involved in Perl and Raku. What we're trying to do, most importantly, improve perception of Perl. That is top of the list. I think Perl's had an unfair time over the last many years for all sorts of reasons. So we need to work hard to improve the perception of Perl and help people look past some of the surface challenges and actually get involved in the technology. So brand and advocacy is part of that. Marketing is another word for it. Sponsors are critical to funding key activities. The grants are, of course, funded by sponsors. So we're looking to retain and develop new sponsors. We support the community affairs team, and the mission there is to improve the quality. We've got a tough balance to strike there, which I think we know about, and again we can touch on that later. We heard earlier a talk about jobs. There's clearly a job shortage. I know where my organisation has sought developers, it's struggled to find them. But there's both Perl skills and a jobs shortage. We need to work out how we can better engage with the UK and Europe, so that there's been conversations around developing European conferences. So Perl Foundation need to work out how we can best support those. There's complexities around legalities, bank accounts, that kind of thing. Developing tools and infrastructure, making sure that the various groups and communities have the things they need to get on with what they want to get on with without tripping over challenges with infrastructure. We need to be showcasing Perl and Raku applications. That's important because to most people, Perl and Raku themselves don't matter. The people are engaging higher up the stack. So we need to work out how we can showcase the things that Perl and Raku enable, as well as to the developer community, what you can enable using Perl and Raku. Community connections is important. When I first became involved, it was very difficult for me to find anyone who could tell me where I would find all of the various communities. I think it's largely unmapped, and as time goes on, one finds more sets of people doing something in isolation, and it's important to have some level of connection as well between the communities. Your ideas are welcome. Perl Foundation is keen to hear what people want, what people think, and what we can do. So the board, I mentioned the team that we have. They're on camera, but I think maybe when we get to the panel, the guys can introduce themselves. It's probably easier to do it at that point. There's 9 board members currently, and the list is on the website. And when the slides are shared, you'll be able to click on the links to get there as well. Board members have a 2-year term, and the other members will ask whoever's at their term what they want to do for the coming period, to make sure we're focused and we have a purpose to our roles here. We've been meeting at least every month for the last 18 months or so. And when there's events and other things going on, we're meeting more often. We have administration support by Nick Evans. So you may see blogs posted by Nick Evans on behalf of the board. It's worth saying that she is the only non-volunteer, so she's paid for her role as an administrator, and she also has marketing experience. So she's taking care of some of the activities. Why that works well is because as a non-volunteer, we can hold her accountable. We can ask her to deliver things on certain days, and that happens. She's very good at that. I'd like to just put security on the agenda. Almost every talk I do, I'll find some angle on security. Supply chain attacks specifically, for us, is something we need to be aware of. We've had the Perl.com issue not too long ago. There's been other issues as well, around CPAN and in the background, but actually some of the recent items I've listed here from some of the other main languages, PHP, Ruby, Pi, NPN, have all suffered from recent attacks on either through the libraries or into the cores. So we all need to be aware of that. It would the risks are out there. We need to not underestimate them, and we just need to be prepared. We need it in our minds when we're doing things, how we mitigate those risks. Board appointments. So historically board members have been selected by the current board, and the president is normally selected from that group of people. There's been a few exceptions as to that. I'm one of those. I wasn't on the board prior to having the role. We will be inviting new board members. There's been debate around membership and democracy and how that might work. Yet another society is not a membership organisation. We can debate the technicalities of that, but the mechanics aren't there for a simple vote of members, because we don't have a list of members who can vote. I'm not suggesting that there's never a conversation in future to have that. I'm saying as it sits today, that's not how that's not the design of the current organisation. And formal elections have a level of rigor that are needed. So if there are going to be some kind of elections, we need to be thinking that through thoroughly. There has been a proposal for community nominations, which then the board will consider, and that's something that we're discussing as a board currently. So there's a proposal written previously on the Perl Foundation blog, and again, when the slides you can either search for that, or when the slides come out, you can click on the link there, and you'll be able to go to that. And that may well be a way that we can enable community to propose people. And what Perl Foundation board will do is put an outline brief and criteria, because taking the role of a board member has a certain amount of liability attached to it. And also we need to consider what kind of skills do we think will be most valuable to the Perl Foundation going forward. Values, transparency. Transparency is important to us. We've had criticism about being lack of transparency, but I think that a lot of the questions around transparency are when there's nothing there, when there's a void, when there's a hole in the dialogue. It's not because someone's doing something behind the scenes that they don't want people to see. It's because maybe that's not something we've been talking about. We've been sharing the meeting notes since April 2020. We have our monthly community meetings, and those are very open. We talk about whatever people need to talk about. The board is active, deliberate, and considered because of this responsibility. So just like if somebody's in the technical community, you have a responsibility for all sorts of aspects of the technology, the Perl Foundation have legal and financial responsibility as well. And listening and supporting the communities is also really important to us. Well, it's critical. That's, like I say, why we exist. Perl Foundation are operating various projects or supporting projects directly. So we've heard about some of the great work that people are doing around Summer of Code, Season of Docs. And so the Perl Foundation are trying to support people to make these things happen. There's various conversations about chat systems, which again, something that Perl Foundation through the community meetings as well are discussing. Recognise Resources is a project to highlight and showcase various aspects of the communities, the people, the resources which are of a level of quality and professionalism, to try and allow people who are coming into our network to go and look and identify where these are. We received a proposal for a contributor research project from Anne Barkham, which we should be undertaking in the coming year. And that will be that will be a set of interviews where Anne would like to, with her researchers, interview various members of the community and get an understanding of how contributors work. Compliance is another project we have. Not getting the level of progress that I'd like, but it is there in the background. There's things like Open Innovation Network, Open Source Initiative engagements, and we're also, I mentioned earlier about the board, we're also consistently looking at what we can do as a board to change and improve as well. Community representatives meeting. So this is the other monthly meeting we've had since August 2020. We have 10 to 15 presentations, lots of active discussions. And this is where people will come along with an idea. Some of the conversations around the recent surveys have come from the community meetings, where the initiative is to say, well, how can we onboard new people? And there's a group of maybe 10, 15, 20 people, depending on which meeting, where we get to socialize ideas, get an early indication of whether people think it's a good idea, and of course getting to know each other. It's another community of people, and it helps. The more people know each other, the faster people can move. And if anyone is interested in representing a community and you're not part of that meeting, then come along, get in touch. Or if you have a proposal that you'd like to come along and lead as well, which will help the Perl and Raku communities, then get in touch. And get in touch, Slack, IRC, the various channels or emails, and I think the email addresses are most likely on the website. You can always email hello@perlfoundation.org as well. The communities that are represented at that meeting, there are people from all sorts of communities. I'm not suggesting, I don't want to suggest that we've got everything covered. There may well be communities who are out there who are not covered, but this is the sets of communities that we have regular engagement with. So we have legal and commercial, for example, where we've looked at contracts for the movement of the Houston location, and also the IPR, the Raku trademark that recently came through. Discussions around grants, and we talked about infrastructure. So there's all sorts of conversations around that, and it helps everyone know what everyone else is doing as well. Help needed. A volunteer coordinator will be useful, someone who's interested in helping, making sure that the people who are volunteering are looked after, communicated with, that we don't have volunteers that we neglect. Marketing is an interesting one. So Mark Keating, who has been responsible for marketing for a while, has had various challenges in the last year. So he's now, we now have the lead role in the marketing delegated temporarily to Dean. There is lots of things we could be doing in marketing and promoting. We definitely need to be all working together to promote Perl and Raku. So if you've got ideas, you've got thoughts around that, then please get involved and share your thoughts. The conference support of TPRC 2022. So next year, all being well, depending on how conditions go, but it's very likely, and the intent is to have a physical meeting in Houston. That's the plan. So unless anything goes badly wrong with the general global condition at the minute, then that's what will happen. It would be of great help to Todd and the conference team, who do an amazing job bringing this together, to have everybody promoting the conference, telling your friends, your colleagues about it, talks, thinking about all the talks, working out who's got really good content, who you could encourage to come along and be involved, and starting early, because it's a big opportunity. It will be the first physical event for a while. The intention is to start early on and get everything put in place as soon as possible. So please support Todd with that. Sponsor nominations. If you know an organization who who benefits from Perl and they're not sponsoring, then maybe you can suggest that to our sponsorship team or bring it to the community meeting as well. So the questions that we have, what do you as the communities want from the Perl Foundation? Why Perl? What made you start with Perl? The reason that's an important question, and I've asked people I've met, I've asked this question because whatever made you start with Perl, that message someone else might resonate and it might make them realize why they need to start with Perl as well. So we do need to be sharing the message, what made you start with Perl? If you have thoughts on what the most important one thing is that Perl and Raccoon need, then share those thoughts. I've asked for one thing because we can all think of 50 things, but if we can pick one thing, if you can suggest one item that you think is most important, then that's a lot more actionable. We can see what we can do with that. Interested to hear what people's visions are for Perl and Raccoon. And that might be technology, it might be framework, it might be future. You might be thinking in 100 years' time, what's going to be, what's Raccoon powering? What is Perl? Is Perl still the glue of the internet or whatever that might be next? And what are your questions? So there's some, I'll look at the chat in a sec, but what I'll do now is I'll stop the screen share, and if you can ping questions, you can raise your hands, and let's hear from you. Right, so let's see. Let's start off with Will. You have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. You said one thing. That's going to be tough, but I guess since it's not my one thing, I'll just mention that the CAT team still seems to be making things worse instead of better. Perl 7 still seems to be somewhat of a mysterious mess. And I think we really need Raku to have its own foundation and programs that are not taking our time and money. But those aren't the things. I think the number one most important thing, which you actually did touch on, is the essentially complete lack of democracy for the Perl Foundation, really for the Perl Core team as well. Both you and Ricardo in your slides actually said explicitly that your groups elect themselves. Your governing group, the board elects itself of TPF, and his core group elects itself for the technical stuff. And last I checked, self-elected governing bodies are not exactly what we want in a democratic society. So I understand that there is no official membership for people in the Perl Foundation. That is clearly going to have to change. You're going to have to make some way for people to buy an annual membership and get a dues card and get a vote. And you're going to have to stop electing yourselves. It's not good. And I have visited a lot with you about things and a lot with your predecessors about things. And I got to tell you that the Perl Foundation could be doing a lot better job. I'm not going to say I hate you guys, but I'm not really very impressed either. But I'm going to be here year after year to try and give some constructive feedback. There's got to be a way, not just to nominate people, but to actually have the whole board voted on by the Perl community, not by yourselves. Thank you.
I appreciate your energy, and we're all aligned that we need to be positive and we need to improve. No question, that's really important. As far as how we do it, it's not going to be as easy as flicking a switch to change into the democracy that is taught there. But we do need to work out how we go on that journey. So let's do that together. Let's work out what the destination needs to be and how we're going to get there. Now, we're not going to solve that today, but again, you know, we need to continue those conversations. Other questions? Any other questions? Keen to hear people's thoughts, visions, what Perl Foundation can do for you. Thoughts of your visions for the future. Sal.
I'd like to chip in a thought for your consideration. I've been involved in some internet-related organizations a few years now. One called the Internet Society and others. And in those communities, they have their way of engaging with their communities. There's sub-communities that are in practice global and very heterogeneous. They take a look at solving their interaction and their democratic deficit, so to speak, by talking about and using this concept of stakeholder communities. Is that concept, the stakeholder community, is something you guys in the Perl Foundation have talked about and considered as something that could perhaps work in our situation?
I will ask my colleagues there who have been with the Perl Foundation longer than I for their thoughts on that.
I've never heard that term. Could you give a definition?
No, when it comes, say, for example, for ICANN, I don't know if you know that organization.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a series of communities of people who have, consisting of people who have common interests or in the greater picture of the greater community. So, for example, in ICANN's case, which is like all about the domain names, the domain name systems, and how to organize that. We have governments, we have the technical community, we have the private sector, civil society, and a bunch of others. Now, this doesn't freely transfer over to the Perl community, but we, as far as I see it, we do have stakeholder communities if we think about it. For example, the academic community. They have a certain type of problems that are common across that constituency. And their voice would be interesting to hear when it comes to those topics, and they have priorities that are worth listening to. And the same would go for businesses, and the same would go for community organizers, and the same would go for the Perl 5 porters, like a steering committee, or the core team, or whatever, or the sysadmin community. Like you could pick and choose anybody who claims to be a stakeholder, if they could gather enough people with the same ideas and opinions, they might be worth listening to. And having them a way to organize those voices, I think, would be very good to get coherent and like a wide set of opinions from everybody who cares about this community, and both at large, but also in specific ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I will say we're sort of doing some of that. So when Stuart was talking about the community meetings we've been having, we have had, it's kind of a mix of two things. We have kind of representatives from communities, for example, from the Racco core team, Perl core team, and talk about things they're doing. And then the other part of it is like volunteer committees in TPF, so like the grants committee, infrastructure working group, community affairs team, and so on. So I think, I looked and I Googled and I found something I think that might be relevant for ICANN. It looks like for them, it's also part of their bylaws, so it's like a more formal thing.
It is.
But yeah, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And if there are other kind of communities we can identify that there's a group of people who feel that they have a common interest related to Perl or Racco and want to participate in these discussions, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and the ICANN community even makes sure to help organize each of those stakeholder communities in such a way that they, if I understand it correctly, they elect representatives to like a steering committee, something like that, as an advisory committee for the board, in such a way that there's like a consistent voice from each of those committees available for the board and the other people who make stuff happen.
Yeah, I think that's a model that I've seen in other places where you have an operational board and you have a separate organization for overall governance, and normally the separate organization may be community voted in, and they hold the board to account who operate the day-to-day. So there are various models we can look at. And again, thinking long term, right now we need to think about what are the things we need to do in the short, medium term, but actually medium and long term, we do need to look at those models and work out what is best for the community. If there is interest in helping develop some ideas around this, then that's the kind of activity you could bring to the community leaders, community representatives meeting, and we can start discussing it and see where we can take it. That's the forum to bring that.
All right, okay. Sign me up.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, get involved. There's a Slack channel. If you've Slack is a bit of a pain as far as if you're a single channel guest, it's harder to get you on there. But if you're not, then we can get you invited to that channel. If you ping me, we'll get that sorted out. Yeah. All right. Excellent. Okay, so there's a message in the chat for from Tux, end user graphical applications. So I'm interested to hear a bit more about that.
Johan Vromans is a well-known person that said it needed it, and I agree. Applications and div use written in Python are common, used, and well appreciated, and we have no applications in Perl whatsoever that give that same user experience. And when we discuss something like that, it's always, yes, I use TK or WX or Prima or whatever to create something, but everything that is created for the person themselves. I'm to blame I only write applications for myself, but what the community is missing is real applications that are in use and useful.
So there's of recent times there's been a significant migration to web as a desktop, and more applications find themselves in a web browser. So there's a lot of movement that way. I'm myself personally, I'm not a fan of that. I much prefer proper integrated applications. So I guess one could consider whether the right approach is a web-based framework to create web applications, or whether actually you're considering more of an integrated desktop GTK type.
I prefer the latter.
Yeah. Okay.
No web-based. A real GUI designer that works as well on Windows as Mac OS as Linux, and is not depending on TK, which is it's fine, but it's looking ancient and well supported. Like WX has died, in my opinion.
And there's a point there, Electron. Yes, well, that's a great example of wrapping web apps into a desktop app.
Electron is slow, and it's a devil to your system resources.
Yeah.
I think as far as this sort of technical stuff goes, this isn't really TPF's role. I mean, our role there mostly is to fund the grants committee. We're not, I think technical initiatives need to start outside TBF. TBF is here to do the grunt work that no person in the right mind wants to do, like incorporate as a 501c3 so we can get insurance for a conference and things like that. Not that I'm saying this is a bad idea, it's just I feel like you're maybe not bringing it to the exact right place to get it action on. So
yeah, and I think my point there is yes, agree with everything Dave said. My point there is that if that is something that is needed and has traction, what needs to happen to make it real? And I mentioned in the presentation earlier about applications, things that people get to use through Perl rather than Perl itself. Maybe a grant application is the way to go. If you or somebody has an idea as to how that might be, then that might be a good place to go for that. Other questions? So there was some comments in the chats around Perl and the debate about how popular Perl is, or there are teams that are looking to remove Perl, and of course the talk from Peter earlier was focusing on some of those challenges. From my experience from the people I've talked to, Perl has received a bad reputation for all sorts of reasons, but often it's because maybe a manager thinks the technology doesn't work and it's Perl's fault. I think in almost every case that I've been involved with, it's always been a business problem, not a Perl problem, and you can make something not work in any language. So I would suggest that when people find those type of challenges, that one considers is it a problem with Perl? Is it a shortcoming of the Perl technology, or is it actually a problem that someone started writing this code 20 years ago without a business plan? The business is now successful, the code's a mess, and maybe it's not Perl's fault. And actually, maybe a migration needs to be modernizing of the Perl rather than moving to a different language. So I think that's one of the challenges Perl has had over the years. And I think there's lots of benefits from putting together a business case for how one could re-implement using a new way of doing Perl, which will always be better than re-implementing, in most cases, depending on if there's technical features that are not provided, which is a different situation. But if it's simply that the code is a mess, no one wants to touch it, it might be that using the same people to re-implement in a different way could well be an answer. So I'm interested in other people's opinions on that, other thoughts. Do other people share those thoughts? Do they have different experiences? Or maybe no one's had any experience of Perl projects being canned?
I think one of the main reasons Perl is expensive to use is that SDKs aren't being delivered by service providers in Perl.
Okay. So SDKs, what kind of SDKs?
Well, think of Amazon AWS. They didn't provide a Perl SDK. There's an open source one which has been put together, but it's not actively maintained by Amazon, and so it's expensive for people to use it.
Okay, so that's maybe an example of a grant. If there were someone who would be willing to develop such an SDK, then maybe a grant would be appropriate to fund that, if that then helps people integrate with it. But you're absolutely right. If a new developer wants to access the Amazon features, then they will go somewhere where there's already an SDK. They certainly won't build it from scratch. I think what needs to happen in those situations is somebody would propose that they think that's a good idea, and a grant might help them make it real.
I also work with a company that used to do a lot of things in Perl, but Perl is being pushed out by Java. As I can see, there are two major problems. First of all, there just aren't enough people willing to program in Perl. If you have 2,500 developers, there are not enough people in the world anymore that want to both move to Amsterdam and work in Perl. And secondly, Perl just doesn't work very well on big servers. We now have servers, lots of cores and CPUs. If people write something in Java, they can use the full potential of a server. If you write the same thing in Perl, you get one CPU. I think Perl has missed the boat a few years ago. There's no way back. As I can see it, the three main platforms nowadays are mobile. Perl doesn't run there. The browser, Perl doesn't run there. and large servers, and Perl just performs poorly there. And I think those are the main issues. I think those are the main reasons why Perl is losing ground. And I don't see any way to turn that tide.
Okay, and yeah, it may well be that it's not appropriate for those key areas. I understand there was a WebAssembly, or there is a WebAssembly project. I'm not very familiar with that in Perl. I understand Raku is designed to take advantage of the multiple processors. Of course, Perl isn't. But
why? If you want to move away from Perl, why move to Raku, where there are hardly any more programmers than there are Perl, instead of Java, where you can choose up 10 million programmers?
Yeah, indeed. And I guess that every environment is different. If what you have is Perl programmers and you have a business that those programmers understand, then in that situation, there may be benefits. It depends on the business and the project objectives, but there may be benefits in doing it. There will be different situations and we can generalize. But I think what we need to be focusing on is, where are those opportunities for Perl? Where is it going to work best? What does it need to do?
May I ask one thing?
Yes,
sorry.
Please.
Until now, if I understood correctly, you all talked about, business opportunities or business areas, etc. I think we've pretty much established that there, as Abigail said, there are many areas where Perl is deficient, I might say, or perhaps it hasn't been able to make strides into. I do also believe there is a problem on the opposite side. I mean, you might see on the grassroots level, by which I mean that there is quite a difficulty to generate enthusiasm about the language, about its feature, etc. In, how could I put it? Sort of amatorial developers and, enthusiasts in general. There are quite a lot that, have been into Perl for many, many years, sometimes decades. And it doesn't seem, at least to me, to be much on the technical level in the language that makes it look as something desirable or innovative for new programmers, etc. A few of them, many of them actually don't even know about Perl, which is something I feel strange about, but perhaps to them is something on the likes of COBOL or something like that. It's just more common on a machine, but they just don't get anywhere close to it. So if we talk about investments, and which is something I believe the TPF is more involved in, rather than the technical side of it, I guess that is sort of a I don't know how to put it. There is a technical component that needs to, in a way, comes first. Perhaps there is a way to reroute the financial investment into making sure that a few of those features, or at least the knowledge about these sort of features, can reach the people who can actually then sort of contribute more to the ecosystem, etc. I wouldn't know how to jumpstart that process, to be honest, but I believe that just focusing on large employers or on large companies, etc., although of course important, since this provides the money and the employment for people in the areas, cannot make do without actually taking into account all of the community of people who actually are interested in Perl because of its virtues or perks or whatever. So something makes it interesting rather than convenient or economically advantages, etc. So I'm not sure that just focusing on companies that are influenced by a lot of factors that are perhaps not under the control of the community and can be steered in a very difficult way would actually help. Perhaps it should be a two-pronged approach, or something that actually does sort of increase the interest, going along with actual technical components that can actually foster that interest of people.
Yeah, I think the components, the Perl needs to be standing on the ability to deliver value rather than any other message. We can't just say come use Perl because it's good and the whole marketing thing and try and sell it, because there's various languages which have got far bigger marketing budgets who would beat anything based on messaging. But actually what would work is delivery of value. If you look at some of the early successes of Perl, and I use the word successes loosely, of course, CGI was very easy to get going some time ago. Lots of people managed to get websites with CGI working very quickly, and of course there were challenges with that with the original script archive, but it solved a problem. It allowed people to get a thing going really rapidly. There's a point in the message in there talking about MVPs, minimum viable products. Can you get something bootstrapped and up and running rapidly? And does Perl deliver some benefit there? But it really is about saying, where does it work best? It's the Swiss Army chainsaw came up in a talk yesterday. So there's so many things it could do, but where's it best, rather than what are all the things that it could do? And I think that's what we need to focus on. Where can people really see that Perl delivers value? We are talking much more about Perl here than Raku, but I think that's warranted because they are in different places in their life cycles. The Raku conversation will be very different to this one. But I think so. I think it's really about working out where it does offer the most value and focusing in on that. And that's where the people who are there every day, creating in Perl, developing, that's where that information is. So JJ, you have your hands up.
Yeah. When you were talking about where Perl and Raku offer value, I think one aspect in which they do offer value is in how well they match, how well they fit the mental model of a developer. A lot of the work, for example, that we're doing for new microservices at work is with Go, which is a fantastic language. It's very fast. It's very neat. Documentation is great. I hate it. Like I just don't like it. I just don't enjoy it. I can be writing something in Perl that is going to be slower, that is going to be in some cases more effort, but I have more fun. I will prototype it faster. I find it easier to navigate. I find it easier to understand. And ultimately, I enjoy it more. I enjoy it more both when I'm writing Perl and when I'm writing Raku. And I think one way in which, one aspect in which we can offer value is in saying to, for example, all those data scientists. I have friends who are data scientists who feel like they have to use Python and they hate it because Python brings a mental model that may or may not fit those people. If we are able to show that there are different languages that can fit different developers better or worse, and present that as a possibility. For example, if there are like, for example, the recent developments that have been going on with trying to bring PDL back up to scratch. If we can say, you of course you can write like data science in Python, but you can also do it in Perl. And if you find that Perl fits your mental model better, then why not enjoy it? Why not write it in a language that you can use, but that you can also enjoy? I guess that's my 2 cents.
Yes, thank you. And that's a comment that a few people have said. I remember it was something that Tux said when we met some time back. Was that you think it and you can then articulate it very easily. And I think something else I heard was that Python's written for computers and Perl's written for people. But there's different views, and I think those may well be. If we can draw that out and help share that message with people, it may well be that there are people who can attach to those messages, recognize that, as well. Brett, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. This is related to previous comments regarding, I quantify it or describe it as application areas in which Perl, most of us would just go to Perl and use Perl because that's what we use. But by and large, there are domain areas and application areas served by other languages. The machine learning and data sciences is a good example with Python, and it's related to things like computer vision. So I was wondering, another good example, for example, is like GUI application building. So if I wanted to create an application that I didn't want it to be a cloud application, though maybe it could interact with cloud services for data and whatnot. But I wanted a native GUI, say a WX widget or GTK, something that I could then distribute. I would want to distribute it, of course, on Linux or Mac, but most of my users might be on Windows. And I know that Strawberry Perl is a great infrastructure, a great ecosystem for Perl and Windows. But another example that I was thinking of is, is Perl something that somebody would go to create a GUI application where maybe most of their users were on Windows? And it's kind of the same thing. It's application focused. So given all of that, given that we know that Perl can do, it can serve a lot of different applications and be used where people specifically on Windows may not even realize they're using a Perl program. Has there ever been any conversation whether within the TPF or elsewhere in terms of identifying, say, specific application areas that people would be interested in seeing Perl, I guess, become deliver the value in? So for example, in computer vision, OpenCV is a really cool library. It's got a really great Python wrapper around it. There's nothing like that within Perl. If I was going to be doing computer vision work, and that goes a lot, that is a big part of the machine learning stuff. Again, going back to the previous speaker's point, I would have to use Python, or I would have to write my own Perl bindings for OpenCV. So I guess my main question / point is, have there ever been any thoughts, or are there thoughts about targeting, specific application areas and working either with community members who are interested in that, or companies like WX Widgets? They maintain their Perl bindings. ImageMagick maintains Perl Magic. Has there ever been any interface or discussions to specifically target areas in which Perl has proven or has a strong potential to deliver value, and then putting some resources behind that?
So your point is very good as far as you talk about OpenCV, where there was a space and Python found a solution to it and were there and have developed well. What are the other spaces? I currently, we're not having specifically that conversation, but I think to identify a space that currently is not served, that would lend itself well to Perl and equally to Raku, there would be no doubt different challenges, but one could consider a problem that would lend itself to Perl and one that would lend itself to Raku. Then I would imagine that the board would be very interested in exploring how that could be supported and encouraged. What we would need is the subject matter. I'm working on a project, a healthcare project, which I mentioned in a thread earlier on the chat, where there is currently there's no coverage in really any language. There's no implementation that does the thing that's needed. And this effectively allows healthcare records to be joined up on a standard globally. So we're investing in building a layer that translates that healthcare data into an open API. So there's one that we've picked up internally, and at some point when it's ready, it would be useful to start sharing that with others and and building it. But that's because we have that problem to solve rather than we're doing it in Perl, but not because we were looking for a thing to lend Perl to. I will come to Michael in just a sec, but does anyone have any thoughts on a niche that would lend itself well to Perl? It would match well with Perl. And Michael, of course, jump in if that is what you were going to respond to. Or if
I
anyone
have
has
one
thoughts
thought on that, Stuart. I think an area that seems especially suitable for both languages is a focus on concision. There has been a lot of research indicating that, no matter the programming language, bugs per line of code is relatively constant, and that one of the best ways to have fewer bugs is to have fewer lines of code. And I think both languages are excellent at achieving the same functionality in fewer lines of code. And in many cases, that makes the code easier to understand, easier to reason about, and just easier to do everything with. And I think that, especially if we're talking about a move away from Perl to Java, that is a real strength, and one that is understandable to software developers and to managers once you bring in the reliability aspect that comes from all the benefits of just having fewer lines of code.
Yeah, so a good point. It's, although not necessarily an application space, that's a good feature which we need to capture that and communicate that to our marketing team, because those are the kind of features, especially if we can put some science behind it, that adds another reason if somebody's considering what they need to choose, why Perl and Raku would be useful.
This is Brett again. This is just, I appreciate the conversation. This is just my final comment. But one other benefit to identifying these application areas or niches is it would necessarily push both languages in uncomfortable directions and maybe bring to light some interesting or needed features. So I think there's many advantages, not only getting some market share and more developers, but also finding out what are the real features that these things are needing. Because right now, what I've observed is that we spend a lot of time talking about, okay, what features do we need? And we're getting, it's like an echo chamber. We're talking about things that are interesting to us and things that we've maybe always wanted to see, or things in other languages that we find interesting. But it's the application of the language that I think drives some really useful features. And there's got to be other features out there. We just need to figure out how to find them.
Well, I think focusing on application area would start focusing on what the important features are for that. We're short on time. I would like to go to Michael, as you've been waiting, and then if we have time, Nigel. So Michael, please.
Okay. Well, in these parts, the UK at least, they're giving school children Raspberry Pi computers and teaching them Python.
Yeah.
And they're teaching them in a really terrible and horrible, boring way, because of course it's a school teacher who's done a conversion course. Perhaps bring the fun of Perl to the children.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest missed opportunity for Perl was Raspberry Pi. That's one of them. But yes, I think that's a really good point. Getting people young, enjoying it may be good. These are the kind of things to bring to the community representatives meeting for both of these. One, considering what application spaces may well lend themselves well to Perl and Raku. And two, if you're interested there, Michael, come along to the meeting. And if you'd like to explore how we might do something with that, then let's go and do it. So I welcome you to join us. There's an invitation if you would like to come and share your thoughts there. Nigel.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly share the idea that I think actually Perl is good for solopreneurs or small startup teams. I've worked in a number of startups, and Perl's been absolutely essential to the success of the project. So, I think maybe we could think about sort of earning money individually as coders or small teams of coders, working on smaller problems. There are lots of different niches out there. So having a kind of a solopreneur approach, because there is a certain point where Perl, code bases in Perl, like 100,000 lines of Perl, it automatically starts to steam up at that point. and it's just one of those things. So it kind of does lend itself to small teams. Yeah, so that's just my point. So that maybe that could be its niche.
Yes, absolutely. And we need to explore that. We need to possibly look at that, 2 or 3 others, and work out where the opportunity is. There's some good points there in the chat as well. And echoing Dave's point there is become involved. This is what TPF can do, is it can help bring people together and turn these ideas, these initiatives into something actionable. So definitely please get involved. And the points on there from JJ, why you started using Perl, you've shown it worked. Good. Let's have more people have that kind of experience. So yes, I think there's some really good points there. Any other last comments just before we close in our last minute? No. Okay. Well, I would encourage people to think about what application areas. That would be a very interesting area for us to focus on and explore further. So if you have any thoughts around that, then get in touch on the Slack channel or by email. And I think we can add that as one of our initiatives going forward to see if that's something that's worth us exploring further. So thank you all very much for taking the time to listen and get in touch, talk to us, keep the conversation going.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.